OK. C'est bon? OK. So this is joint work with Jonathan Eaton and Samuel Cordham, and it's very much related to trying to bridge two fields, labor and trade, in a very structural way. No? OK, that's OK. Let's do it this way, or hopefully. Yes. An overview of the paper will start from individual firms that interact with each other, sourcing inputs and locating buyers from around the world. We'll use evidence on French exporters linked to their individual customers. The goal is to generate granular quantitative model of firms, jobs, and trade with richer formulations of trade friction. And today I'll be focusing on structural estimation. Okay, even though we need to give some elements before that. C'est assez frustrant quand même. Ah. Does it work? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Great. So there's a bunch of papers that do things that are pretty related, even though they don't try to connect that to labor most of the time. Lucas, 2009, Oberfield in revision, Chanet in a set of papers. And so in this paper, we just have firms that buy and sell inputs to each other, sometimes internationally, and sometimes displacing workers. That's the element. So the fundamental features of the paper is that there's a fixed point a la Lucas and Oberfield that would generate distribution of input prices, distribution of output prices, the distribution of a bunch of other things. And the intuition is very simple. I'm a firm, I'm producing stuff. This stuff can be used by any other firm, so Daron's firm. Then that firm is going to sell to some other firm, and in the end, I'm going to buy some of the elements that somehow I've been using. That's what we're going to model. Integrating in that endeavor, integrating the decision to keep workers or not. And we'll add, so we'll have a purely competitive model adding search frictions. And we'll see that they have implications that are essentially similar to a fixed cost. The central empirical insight is that we can identify bilateral information frictions by distinguishing French exporter selling in a market and customers per firm. Okay, there's a bunch of papers. That's where I had Daron, but I thought it was not enough, so I started the way I started. The data come from one cross-section of something that Isabelle has been getting from the customs, which is, we know for every French manufacturer in each EU country, their customers. So we know precisely over a long period of time, but we'll use a cross-section, all the customers, be they manufacturers or retailers in every European country. And there's also, I wouldn't say competing paper, it's another paper that has Bernard Mokstedt and Eltveit Mø using Norwegian exported data, and the stylized files are pretty similar. Okay, one table I will try to predict using my structural estimation is this one. So we have here 4 countries with different market sizes. They are ordered by increasing market size, and you see that the number of customers per exporter goes from 1.5 to 9.6 in Germany. And then if you look at the distribution, it's very, very skewed. And you have a sense that there are some firms that have loads of customers, okay, which is okay. So identities, and that will be one way we will think about and distinguish ourselves from previous work, and in particular things that, if you think of what we call EKK1, we're thinking about explaining the number of French exporters. Here, we'll be focusing much more on, so is this, yes, on relationships. And relationships will be the sum over all exporters of the number of customers. And B denotes the average number of buyers per French exporter. Okay, that's what we're going to focus on. And we'll see that we totally overlooked one number in the EKK1, one slope in a regression, and we'll be doing much better now. Okay. So typically, EKK1 was predicting, sorry, I'm not totally fluent in this thing, was predicting that the number of French exporters, so this is French market share in country N, should have been 1. Okay, it should have been 1. Our new theory will predict that the 1 should be here, which is what is in the data. Okay? So merits in that respect without this addition is counterfactual, and EKK1 is counterfactual. So we're so sorry, but we're doing better now. I have ideas of where we're not going great. I'm not going to tell you. That's your job to find out. And in fact, because of the technique we use to structurally estimate things, we'll be spot on this regression when we use simulated data. So there's nothing that's also pretty well estimated later. Okay? So these are data. If you look at but now, again, what we're doing in EKK1, and that was really extremely striking for me, that I had met for the first time Jonathan Eat and Sam Cornum like yours 1 or 2 years before, is one thing they did was to align number of French exporters onto market size. And this was pretty blurry. But suddenly, theory tells you that you have to divide by French market share in that destination. And then suddenly it went so well aligned, I was convinced that structural estimation was granted. And we were calling for that. But we're so happy about this, we didn't pay attention to the slope. You've seen this 0.6. But now we do the same number of French relationships, thousands, adjusted for market share.
What is market size?
Market size is the size of the country in log form. Yes, it's just in log form. And what you see is this very nice slope, and it's in fact 1. Okay? Or, yes, let me continue. So now something you haven't seen is on the number of customers. So these are the number of French exporters exporting to Germany and also to some other country. Okay? There's one issue here. If data were perfect, we'd be able to identify the French firms that sell to other French firms, which is possible for Belgium, but that's not France. So that doesn't help us in that strategy. So what we do to study selection effects, for instance, is to focus on all those French firms that export to Germany, but Germany and also other countries. So these are the other countries. You can see the names here. You see that there's a nice downward sloping thing. And these are the countries that are hard to attain. So that's Estonia, Latvia, for instance, Lithuania, etc., Slovenia, Slovakia. And what you see is that the number of customers in Germany per French exporter, exporting also there, is increasing. So those firms that are selected, because they not only export in Germany, but also in very strange countries, we all hope we'll be beating Bulgaria this evening. But we don't have Bulgaria here, unfortunately. Also are good in Germany. They're potentially efficient firms that export to many customers in Germany, okay? So that's what we see here. So we need something that will generate that kind of feature. Okay, the model is a model of firm-to-firm trade, as I've mentioned before. We have many countries. All countries are separated by trade costs, as usual, and surge frictions. There will be no surge frictions within France. I will be, most of the time, the sending country, so for the data, France. And we have endowed with workers of various skills and a continuum of potential producers. Okay, production will be simple. We'll have a measure of producers in I with efficiency above Z, potential producers. They will only exist if they have one customer either in France or abroad. Okay? And that's only the realization, and there will be some probabilities about this. So the Cobb-Douglas production function over tasks, we remember lessons from Acemoglu Autor, I'm sorry, that's the right order. And a lot of literature in labor that focus on tasks, and I believe it's pretty important. So the production function has DNI, the trade cost, the efficiency, and then you have all these costs of producing task K, and this is a Cobb-Douglas function over tasks. And the firms choose the cheapest way to carry out each task. Okay, so either they get a supplier that offers them a price which is lower than the price of labor divided by some efficiency of the firm, Q, capture the efficiency of the firm of firm J in doing task K in country I, and they just select the minimum of the two. Okay, and then they will decide whether they keep their workers or just fire them, and Macron is not around, neither the CGT. Okay, so assume unit labor costs are random, that's the Q productivity measure. Assume, so it's pure competition, okay? We have no sense in, so we're really trying to think about melites, but with pure competition, no fixed costs, and some surge costs. What does it give? So we need to think about who buys from whom. So we'll use this measure relevant to buyers in N, as we'll see. And here, buyers get connected to suppliers. So the assumption is that a buyer in N is exposed to a given supplier in I, from I, at cost C, at the Poisson intensity that has this thing here. Okay? So a buyer will see more efficient suppliers, low-cost suppliers, as you can guess, because mu of C is, well, decreasing in C. Okay? Supplier in I, it's aware of, with cost C, with cost below C, are distributed Poisson with parameter rho. So let me rephrase this or repeat this. The supplier that a firm is aware of is distributed Poisson. Okay, the lowest price, P, available to a buyer is distributed Fréchet with parameter that has all these mu NSC and L being some sort of exogenous measure of size. Okay? Good. The main result, so we just do some sort of restriction, then we can summarize the distribution as something that stays. So this is important. We start from a distribution without introducing these exchanges and all these elements. We start from a distribution that is a power law. The distribution of C to the power theta. Here, what happens is that even though there's all these exchanges, it stays in the same C to the power theta functional form, which helps us doing lots of things. And here you see the essence of the fixed point. I haven't told you what the Xi is, but the Xi is a mixture of W's, the prices of, the fact that you buy from others, the lambdas. And so there is really this fixed point that we solve in Xi I that capture what you can get from other, for all tasks and across countries. You see here, there's the summation over I prime is across countries. Okay, so there's competition. You buy from potential producers, and there's lots of competition across countries. Okay, so we're happy with this. And then there's a bunch of corollaries. You can sum over country sources. You get a bunch of rows. And so, again, one issue here, and I'll be mentioning that later, trying to solve the question, is what do we add to the DNI? DNI is the trade cost. What is this lambda NI? Okay, why is it different? For the moment, we've seen it just multiplies DNI to the power minus theta. So maybe there's not much difference. So where is there action? Okay, we think of trait friction, what should they be? And I'm super happy that Faril started because I receive your stuff and you'll see some of your language thing, which is one potential explanation for this, but there may be others. Okay, so other corollaries, the probability for a firm of outsourcing a task relates these two things. I haven't defined new precisely, but it depends on other parameters. It connects back to the key parameters of the cost measure, so this is how we compute Xi. That has the nice thing of having this machinery is that you have macro implications and micro implications. I will focus on the micro. We're going to use macro estimation, use the estimates to look at macro implications. I'm not going to do this here. We just have like 40 minutes. So anyway, so the labor share. There's a set of questions about labor shares. So we'll be able to generate a distribution of labor shares across firms. But this is the aggregate labor share. And it's pretty well tied to the theory. We have also the labor shares in production that are weighted sum across the betas. Then we have trade share. And the nice thing about the trade share is that it has this lambda ni times the ni stuff. So it's really somewhat proportional to lambda, even though there are other elements in the epsilon which are related to the Xi, which includes lambda. So there are lots of nonlinearities, and I'll be trying to. So at this point, it's hopeless disentangling lambda ni dni. For those who know Sam well, it's Sam who wrote that slide because I wouldn't dare using the apostrophe here. He's American, he's allowing himself to do that. Okay, closing them all. So there is also households. Find wages that clear the market, taking account of endogenous labor shares and trade shares. There's no unemployment, as you can guess. Firm level results. So there's that connection to data and predictions about suppliers finding buyers. So far, it's been about buyers finding suppliers. So here, the very efficient suppliers potentially find lots of buyers. But buyers could be very efficient themselves. Okay? We've tried to extend our model to allow for some sort of associative mating. It doesn't fly. We cannot keep the C to the theta. So there's a limit here. We know how to accommodate it with types and stuff like that. Econometrically and even theoretically, we can match everything if we want. But that's less satisfying than having a full-fledged theory of associative mating between. And in fact, in the data, what is really fascinating is that there is negative associative mating. That is, large firms tend to have lots of small buyers, yes. And small buyers buy from also large firms. I mean, there's lots of negative things that are not easily accommodated in this framework. Well, they can be accommodated, but anyway. So we observe French manufacturing firms and their customers in 24 other EU destinations. We also, in fact, we observe more than the manufacturing firms, but we focus on those. Customers in N are firms, but need not be manufacturers. So our theory, in fact, takes those buy as either manufacturers or wholesalers, retailers, and only the manufacturers sell back. Okay? Because the wholesalers or retailers, they just sell to consumers. Okay. Suppliers finding buyers, so number of buyers in and from high delivering at cost. So these are things that we're going to use to compute our micro implications and to face theory with data. Okay, so we aggregate over tasks. We integrate over the cost distribution of those firms from I that can attain any. So if you have mu I, C, you just multiply by dni. So mu ni mu I of D and IC, mu and I of C is in fact mu I of D and IC. Okay? You just multiply because the trade cost ensures linearly here. And that gives you expressions for the measure of firms from I selling in N. This, in fact, number rises in proportion to DNI, to the power minus theta, hence with measure of low-cost suppliers. But lambda Ni enters only nonlinearly through eta NIC. That's a way for us to think about distinguishing, identifying separately DNI from lambda Ni and the different roles. So essentially, I'll be saying that again, I guess, DNI is about costs, lambda Ni is about information. So for instance, if you think about entry market share and market size, larger lambda Ni tends to pile up more buyers on each seller. Okay, because you have those sellers that are very efficient, and lambda Ni has an impact not due to cost, but just due to lambda Ni itself. So if lambda Ni increases, the same sellers will have more buyers. That's how it works. Okay? Thus, raising entry by less than in proportion to market share. Only takes one buyer in N for firms to be exporting there. If lambda Ni is equal to 1, then NNI is proportional to market share by NIs and in AKK1. Such friction act like a fixed cost, deterring entry, but more buyers via M bar makes connection with the seller more likely. So there is an effect of the size of the market. Thus, market size effects are similar to a Melitz model as in EKK1. So that's good, because our goal is to destroy, I shouldn't say things like that, but to show that you can exactly reproduce and have more with a model like this, with pure competition, no fixed cost, just frictions, and generate every prediction and more than you have in Melitz, empirically. Okay? So that's what we succeed at doing. Okay, relationships. Relationships, as you can see, is here it's proportional to market share, and to lambda Ni dni to the power minus theta. But buyers per exporter should rise with lambda Ni and with pi Ni, rather than dni minus theta. Okay? So we have this expression, and using this, we're going to be estimating the whole things. We can also compute conditional relationships as the one I've shown you for those exporting to Germany and somewhere else. So we can do all this type of computations. Since we have tractable integrals and expressions, we can do selection effect and think about this. Distribution of buyers, we can do also the same thing and look at the full distribution. We're going to use that, again, to match to our data. Estimation, good. So simplification, service works perform task 0, manufacturing workers, all other tasks. In this industry, there's another industry in the G component. There's a task-specific contact rate. Lambda 0 is equal to 0. That is, you cannot outsource services. And among services, to pay a tribute to Farid, there would be also R&D. For us, R&D would be there. So we focus in the data, and we think about labor shares, we'll be focusing on production workers. So the 47 won't be there. It's going to be about the 48, which is PCS parlance. So we task share, beta 0 is interpreted as purchases services. Beta k is 1 minus beta 0 over k. K is the number of tasks. We're going to try to estimate k, the number of tasks. And we'll see that, again, if we think about potential improvement, having only one number of tasks may be a problem. You would like to have different firms with different number of tasks. But that's not very interesting economically, and there's, you can think about what we have now. Okay, the parameters. So we'll condition on French trade shares that we won't be explaining, and that will absorb a lot of the things we have. So we'll be conditioning on a bunch of things, okay? We condition on the labor share in manufacturing, and then we have remaining parameters, the lambdas, k, beta 0 and all the thetas phi. So they call it phi, funny phi. That's what Sam and Jonathan call it. Lambda and lambda NF. Lambda is lambda k. We have the same lambda for each task. Okay, there's no difference in the task. We just and the beta k are going to be essentially 1 over k. Okay, this is what I've shown you before. Okay, strategy algorithm. Good. So we match share of manufacturing intermediates to fraction outsourced, and we can compute this thing. Okay, back out the measure of potential customers to match relationships. Okay, so we're going to have a perfect match of number of exporters, number of relationships. Okay, that's going to be, so I'm going to show you the graphs, but that's a good way to be sure that we didn't screw up in the program. But that's essentially conditioning on that and getting the other things to see what happens. Okay, so then we change the variable y by replacing tf, that's the ti for France, psi f c to the power theta, to construct the Poisson parameter. So all terms on the right-hand side except y are either parameters or data. Okay, so we just iterating, so we'll be using a simulated method of moments, and we'll be iterating over this. Okay? So with the change of variable, moments become simple integrals. For instance, the measure of French exporters to n is going to be an integration over y of this thing. Okay? In similar manner, we compute, for instance, the distribution, so the different percentiles in the fraction of France entering a country, and match that to the data. Same thing for the different conditional stuff for Germany, Belgium, or Cyprus. And we use data coming from WIOD and construct pi and f for manufacturing industries, and the beta NL and ln is the population. Okay, parameter estimates, that's what we get. I'm not sure. So we get k, which is equal to 30. We started from 20, we moved to 30 and didn't budge. And the estimates of pi lambda NF are easier to interpret when plotted against pi NF, and also some measures of language proximity to France. Okay? Okay, graphs. So data, well, the squares are the model, red squares. The data are crosses. No surprise. We've done things so that we match them perfectly. And this is market size. And here we have a number of French relationships adjusted for market share. And you see a very tight slope. And what we see here essentially is this, well, we just get, there's no screw up in the program. We like that. Here, this is the conditional one. The data we've seen it before. The model tells us that there's a small thing here going. So the model overpredicts the number, the selection effect. Okay, remember that the small countries are where the selection effect takes place. It seems to be somewhat overpredicted, but we'll see it's not that much. Again, these are log scales here and there. And here, mean number of buyers per French exporters. That's pretty tight, as we can see. But Germany, there's a difference here. It's easy to know which country it is because they should be aligned. The data and the model are plotted on the same x of the axis, okay? Reasonably. But we see that the things are pretty good and there's not much difference, okay? Mean number of French suppliers per buyer and market share. So again, market share, mean number of French suppliers per buyer. This is a log scale. So this is magnified in some sense. But the numbers, so there may be a small difference here. So the average number is like 2.2, 2.3. And here our numbers give something like 1.3, okay? So it looks very far, but if you look at that table, which is the equivalent of the first table I've shown you, the data are between parentheses. We see that we get, we should be pretty happy with ourselves. This seems to be very reasonable numbers, including at the 99th percentile. Okay? You see that even for Germany, we get like 89 versus 117 in data. Remember that, well, something I haven't mentioned, but a firm cannot buy from more than 30 suppliers because of 30 tasks, k equal to 30, as estimated, okay? So for that, it's very easy to have like firms that buy from, that have 2 tasks and other that have 100 tasks. That would help us match these results much more, and even more the distribution of labor shares across firms. Okay, so this is Farid and Belitz, but the other Belitz, the more important one, the father, because otherwise Marc would not have existed without Jacques, as you can guess. And he's a great colleague. We speak Yiddish together. That's fun. So here we take the lambdas that we've estimated, and we try to see what they capture. And we use this language proximity measure between French and other countries. Okay, we see that Luxembourg, for instance, is a very popular destination. Belgium, too. Potentially, Portugal is also seems to be pretty popular in terms of relationships, which you wouldn't expect. It's close. But, so there may be something like this. Maybe we should add like the number of Portuguese people living in France, because that would be a good explanation versus some other things. Try to understand how these frictions operate. But we see that here, the R-square is 0.37. We have 23 observations, and this is log on log, so it's an elasticity which is pretty good. Okay, conclusion, and I think I'm spot on despite the fears that were sent to me at 3 in the morning by Sam, and I must say I would like to thank Etienne, Guy, who's here and who has been extremely, well, instrumental in cranking out all this with us. So I think the theory captures some striking patterns in the microdata. It's pretty easy to work with at the aggregate level. What we've seen here is estimation in partial equilibrium. And of course, there are many other things we can do with the parameters to think about the G components of that research. So just to have a sense of what's happening, we've been starting this project about 10 years ago. It's the same thing that happened for our first paper, but we're pretty lucky with it. We like it, and we'll like it even more, not to mention the new steps in our research. Thank you. That's okay. I'll survive.
So just to so there is no general equilibrium here, though, at the buyer level, meaning that it is not taken into account whether the buyer is buying from other countries and therefore that changes its demand.
No, we take that into account. It's really weird. The whole thing, you can.
But do you have data on that?
No. So, okay, so let me tell you what we're trying to do to account for other countries. We're going to have a 26th country, which will be the rest of the world. Using these predicted, using so the lambdas, we're going to have them for France. But think about regressing as we've started with language proximity. You can predict the lambdas for the rest of the world, even from other countries than France to other countries. So we're going to use that to generate some sort of general equilibrium worldwide.
So even though you don't have data
exactly.
on that, you are implicitly doing that in the GMM procedure.
We'll be in, not everything, okay, at this stage, we haven't included in the estimation procedure the other countries, but that's what we're going to do. And we have, I think, a pretty good way of doing this. We need first to predict the lambdas, because they're instrumental, and generate the whole set of exchanges, but having all other countries in one. Thank you. Vas-y, vas-y.
Thank you. So I had a few difficulties to grasp everything.
Me too, to be That's why we're three.
So you say one of the goals is to fit the data and replicate the Melit's prediction with another framework.
No, the goal, it's one benefit.
One benefit.
And in some sense, it's something that we believe should be important in any model that speaks to the data, is to be able at least to reproduce the basic facts about the number of exporters.
Yeah. But in terms of, let's say, welfare, do you have contrasting prediction?
In other versions of the paper, we had done that, but not using these estimates. So these estimates are really like 1 week old, so I cannot tell you. We can show that with these kind of features, we can have some sort of skilled bias effects against the unskilled workers because we have different skills. So there are a bunch of things we can do, but we haven't redone them with the new estimates. But that's, I think, in our agenda.
You need another year, 2 years?
No, I hope not. No. The goal is to the goal is to go to the next step. Thank you very much. Thank you.